So this is the trickiest lecture, the recursive one. Just because I'm going to be hyper aware of my presentation skills during this one. So before we get into the details here, what are we actually talking about? So we're talking about the presentations. You will have a video presentation at the end of the semester. So some of the content in today's slides is meant for live presentations, because usually these are live presentations. Being online only, being remote, we're going to have them as video presentations, but a lot of the same concepts still apply. So there are only a few things that will only apply in a live lecture, and I'll try to highlight those as we get to them. Though you'll probably be able to, just with some common sense, figure out which ones apply and which ones don't. But this is what we're talking about, the presentation. This is the gold, this is the, I'm blanking on my analogies. See, my nerves are already kicking in. Presentation about presentations. I gotta expect it to be sharp with everything. Anyway, this is the rubric. I don't know. I don't have a fancy way to call it. Of how you're going to be assessed. So make sure you're familiar with this, especially as you do the activities later this week. Make sure you understand how you're graded, and this lecture is going to really, show you how to be successful in this presentation. So, is there anything else I want to say about this that's not in the slides? I think the one thing I don't think is in the slides is that everybody does have to present. I hope that's in here. I know we have it written many places, but I want to make sure it's somewhere official. I'll look it over some other time. Anyway, everybody does have to talk. It can be unevenly distributed. So if somebody is like leading the presentation, does most of the talking, but everybody does have to talk during that presentation. Okay. All right, let's get on with this. Presentation about presentations. So I left something. So a lot of this, as you know, these are Dr. Hertz's slides. A lot of the things I did leave in, especially with this presentation, are they're very Dr. Hertz specific and stories that he's telling from his perspective. I did leave most of them in here because a lot of them do also apply to me. And even when they don't apply to me, if they didn't happen personally to me, I still want to talk about them. This one has definitely happened to me. Reading comments after reading the course evals after a semester is one of the most torturous processes. It's the biggest hit to my confidence. 2 times a year is reading these things. You get comments like this. Everybody gets these. The context changes, so Dr. Hertz doesn't get the presentation comments like this anymore as much. I should say I can't read his evals, but I assume he doesn't get them very much at all anymore, if at all. But students always pick something to absolutely tear apart and crush your soul with. They're just brutal. I would say brutally honest, but some of them are just plain brutal without being honest. They're tough. But anyway, you get comments like this, and it's tough. But we do take the essence of these to heart sometimes, especially these ones. They're talking specifically about our ability to present. That's something that we can take action on. There's no constructive criticism here. But, okay, students are complaining about my presentations. Let me work on my presentations. There is something that we can take from these. sounds like someone who received a bad grade because of their selves. I mean, I wasn't going to say it directly, but if you're going to say it, I'll, yeah. It's usually students. Fine, I'll give my hot take on that. I think it's usually students who obviously received a bad grade and they can't or don't want to admit that it was their fault and they need somebody to blame. So they take out their insecurities and frustrations on us. And, it just sucks. I mean, some of the comments are public. You can go to Rate My Professor and read some of those comments. They're out there. Students just need to lash out at someone, is what I've come to agree. Sometimes there's nuggets of stuff that we can actually have some actionable action items from. But in the really scathing ones, there's usually not much. Usually the same comments will be written by more respectful students, and we can actually take something from that and give some feedback. The students are just like, you suck. What am I supposed to do with that? Like, you're not trying to improve the next class at that point. You're just lashing out. Anyway, let's talk about presentations. So I'll try to keep this in the context of your presentations. So one of the big things you can do with presentations is make things relatable. And these are the two things that Dr. Hertz did specifically right off the bat to make his presentations better, is to be more relatable. One of our main goals with presentations and courses is just to get information from my head to your head. But making it relatable is going to help a lot more. So one of the things Matt started being more open about is not being so good at math. I tried to do this a lot by exposing some of my vulnerabilities as well. When I first started, and I think when a lot of faculty first start teaching, there's a fear of getting a question that you can't answer is one of the common newbie fears that we have. And I certainly went through it, and I would try to answer every question that I got. And one of the things that I do now that I started doing is just when I don't know the answer, just say, I don't know. I'm just some guy here. I don't know the answer to that. And one of those things that can make you just more human definitely helps. I like to do live demos. We saw it the last few lectures in 442 after lecture. I would just go out on the internet and try to do something. And, I didn't have the best success. I was deploying a Django app on Heroku and it was a mess. We got there, but it took a long time. Things like that can be more relatable. Like, I'm not a superhero at programming, and that's more relatable than if I just do everything great the first time because I spent 10 hours rehearsing a lecture. That's not as believable. So this is one of the things, and in the context of your presentations, make it relatable to your audience. You're talking to an audience who presumably should be buying your app. The idea of the presentation is to advertise your app. This is not a technical video. It's going to be a advertisement to potential customers, trying to get them excited to buy your product, to actually use your app. So relate to them. Don't just say, here's our app, this is what it does. Why should they care? Like, how is it relatable to them? I'm going to spend forever on one slide if I don't advance it. The other thing he did is just studying. I actually bought this book in preparation for this lecture. I haven't had time to look at it yet, so unfortunately I can't use the ideas from it. But Dr. Hertz also formally studied presentation styles. And I've gotten a lot of wisdom from him over the years of being able to improve my own lectures. But now I'm going to go directly to the source and get some good ideas. So meet my presentation. We'll characterize the presentation. His name is Prez. And we're going to explore what Prez is. So what is this presentation? Prez, it is not a Word document. Let's start off with what it's not. Not a Word document. There will be very few actual text words on the slides today. And with your advertising presentation, I'd say you should have as few words as possible, which should be a very minimal number of words. There's really not any reason. There's no reason to really use words in your presentation. You can use vocal words, you can talk a lot of words, obviously, but your presentation shouldn't just be blobs of text. Your words on the presentation itself, the visual words on screen, at a minimum. So as it relates to lectures, we do use a decent amount of words. We do have words on the slide, and that's not to improve the presentation. I want to make that clear. We don't do that to improve the presentation. It does make the presentation worse, but we do use a lot of words on the slide because students like to download the slides and study from the slides themselves. And if the slides don't make sense without the context of a presenter, then they have to either watch the video, or in the days before we had recorded lectures, they just couldn't review. They couldn't review unless they were at lecture live and took really good notes. So we have slides. We have words on our slides by necessity. It's not to make the presentation better. You don't have that situation with your presentation in this class, so you shouldn't be using words. There's no real reason to use written words on your slides, except at a bare minimum and when they're very effective. Presentation is also not an opportunity to brag. You shouldn't be talking about how great your app is. Look at this app. It's so much better than the competition. Isn't that great? That's why you're going to use this, because we're the best and we're great. You should be focused on your users, not on how good you are. You should be focused on what this app is going to do for your users, and not just bragging about how great everything is out there. Anyone take CS50s? Yeah, David has awesome presentations in CS50. He actually presents them in the theater at Harvard. Fantastic presentations. He'll get members of the audience up to actually demonstrate some of the algorithms. They're fantastic lectures. I wish I even had the time to sit down and think up lectures like that. Maybe someday I'll have lectures like that. And so your presentation exists to show off your app and what it can do for your users. Not just to say our app is the greatest thing in the world, so you're going to use it, but explain why they should use it. And this is one of the really sad things. Something I'm kind of, there's nothing I can really do about it, but this is the way that makes the most sense. But anyway, back a few years ago in 442, I would have video submissions for every single sprint. So you'd be making 4 videos, one for each sprint, to show off your progress in the current state of the app. And it would be mostly in this style of a, sell me your app thing. And we don't have those now. And one of the big things that I lose, I'm not going to change the course just because I want it. So it's all about education and you. But one of the things that I don't have anymore is that I'm really disconnected from your projects. I don't get to see what you're exactly doing. I can go to the repos and look at the code, and I could, clone the code and run it from source and everything. Doing that for 36 projects would be very time consuming, but watching the videos, I actually get to see everything. So I actually don't get to see what all of y'all have built until the end of Sprint 4, the end of the semester. Then I get to really enjoy all the projects. And especially with the hackathon over the weekend, I really missed that. I got to watch a lot of hackathon videos and see some really cool projects and really cool ideas come to life. And it just strikes me, it's just odd that I can't quite get that in my own course, but I could get it, just visiting the hackathon, because, the teams had to submit videos at the end. So the idea is to sell your idea and sell your project. And I'm one of the consumers of that. I really enjoy seeing what students have created. But you should focus on the app itself and explain it in a way that your customer and the users are going to understand. So you shouldn't, one of the big no's in your presentation, never ever show source code in your presentation. Nobody wants to see that. If somebody wants to see that, they'll go to your GitHub. But when you're selling an app, never show source code, ever. If I see any source code in any of your videos, that's a direct hit to your grade. It's one of the rows in the grading rubric is that you focused on your users and your actual audience that you're targeting. No code at all. Um, think of a Kickstarter video. If you're having trouble really grasping what we're asking for here, think of a Kickstarter video. You're showing off your idea and your project, and you want to try to get people to fund this project. That's really your main goal. And look through those Kickstarter videos, any successful Kickstarter campaign, and tell me like how many words did they have in their presentation, written words. Did it feel like a PowerPoint? It shouldn't. What did they do? And that's going to give you a good idea of what we're doing. Did they get into source code if it's a software project? But if you want some inspiration, go to some successful Kickstarter projects. That's what we're talking about here. And get down to the key issue of your project. There should be one key issue and one point that you're really driving home, and then hit that point continuously. So what's the key to your presentation? That's what you need to really emphasize and highlight and make sure that the audience is getting that key point down. Audience are notoriously not going to pay attention to every word that you say, so make sure the key point is emphasized and comes across loud and clear. You want to use my app because it's going to solve this problem. That needs to be very well highlighted. Even some of the hackathon videos over the weekend, they would go on and on about other stuff. I notice I'm doing it in my lecture even today, is going on and on about some side story and some very specific part of the project, and they'll do that before they even told me what the project is supposed to do. Like I was still wondering, like, why should I be using this app? Like, that needs to be front and center. Why should I use this app? That's your key point. And then any other auxiliary details can be filled in, can be in the video. Focus on that key point. Just like a fantastic movie, Highlander, they had a great movie with a key point. There are these immortals competing to be able to be the last one remaining. Very simple key point, very simple story structure at the high level at least. They're all competing to be the last one, and there can only be one remaining. They made a sequel, which was not so great. And they missed their key point. There can only be one key point in your presentation. Just keep it at one, just like they should have done with Highlander. Take their own tagline and just have one fantastic movie. Don't try to jam a second one in there where nobody wants it. So if you're selling your idea, you're going to use this app because of this. Don't also be like, well, you could also use it for this thing over here. No, focus. One key point. Great. So I have some purpose and a theme, and I'm driving home my key point. Done, right? Well, there's one big problem here. Audiences don't usually pay attention. Just look at the viewer count today. I mean, it's less than half the size of the class. Like, sometimes people don't even tune in, much less pay attention when they show up. I would guess that a good number of you are basically half listening as I'm saying this and not really paying attention. And only a small percentage of the audience is really engaged with what's happening right now. This is very typical. That's a typical audience. So you have to do something to get them engaged, something to rile them up, something to get them going. In a live lecture, sometimes I'll just wave my arms around and start shouting about stuff and just really emphasize this is a point you need to be paying attention to. And then you'll have their attention. Okay, they're paying attention. Now hit your key points and hit them hard. One downside to this is once you get their attention, they're going to lose focus really quick. So I can easily get someone's attention in a lecture. Sometimes I'll do this by swearing. I'll drop an F-bomb in lecture sometimes. I know the whole class is listening to me right after that because they're like, holy shit, what just happened there? The professor swore. You're going to be listening right after that. I got everybody's attention. But it's a 50-minute lecture. I can't just keep doing that over and over, and it's going to get old. So there's only a few things. Exactly. I say shit, and you're going to listen for a little bit. But you're only going to have their attention for a little bit of time. if it's a 50-minute lecture or your 5 to 7 minute presentation video, you're not going to be able to hit them, just keep hitting them and hitting them harder with things that grab their attention. You have to keep their attention over a long duration. So like bells and whistles or playing loud noises on the slides or showing a YouTube video or whatever you're doing to try to grab their attention, it's important to keep it. So how do you keep their attention and keep them listening to what you have to say? And there's another factor to this, which makes it difficult, is as humans, we like to make decisions based on our emotions. I mean, it's just kind of human nature. It's very tough to force yourself to make decisions rationally and logically. So the same applies when we're presenting and watching presentations, is if you just show me a very logical, like a presentation from a lawyer going from point A to point B to point B, connecting all the dots and reaching conclusion Z, and everything might flow very logically, but it might be super duper boring. So to get people engaged and keep them engaged for a longer duration of time, you got to hit their emotional center, get them feeling something, and it can be anything. It doesn't really matter necessarily what the emotion is, as long as they're feeling some emotion, which can get into some dark and gray and even dark areas of presenting. So if you strike fear into people, that's the strongest motivator. Fear is the strongest motivator, and it's going to keep people's attention the most. I'll try to limit the social commentary, but you can see a lot of fear mongering out there in the world by people who profit off of your attention, because that is the strongest emotion, is fear, which makes sense because we need a strong fear center if we're going to stay alive. If something's an immediate threat to my life, I need to be afraid of that, so my systems kick into high gear and I can get away from the threat with my life intact. So fear is the strongest emotion we have. Using it in an educational lecture is, gray or black area, but sometimes can be effective. It will be effective, I'll say that. But we'll talk about ethics later in the semester. It's not very ethical. For your presentation, get them feeling some sort of emotion. Bring up something that's going to trigger an emotion. And the stronger the emotion, I won't say the better necessarily, but the more they're going to remember that experience. The biggest things you remember in your entire life are those spikes, those highest emotions that you've ever felt. Those are the things you remember the most. So to do this in our presentations, we're not just going to say you're going to die if you don't learn recursion. We're going to, and somehow make that believable, but we're going to tell a story. A good story is going to evoke emotions, and it's going to evoke emotions over a longer period of time. So we're not just grabbing their attention by saying you're going to die. We're telling a longer, drawn-out story and getting them invested in the story so that that the audience can experience a roller coaster of emotion, as we say, throughout the entire presentation. So, and this is how you should be structuring your presentation. This is one of the rows on the rubric, that you're telling a good story throughout the presentation. It doesn't have to be like a literal story, like a movie or something, but it should flow with these key points. So first, start here, not here. So start somewhere after the beginning of the story, and you'll notice that I'll hesitate a little and not say all, but most great stories don't start at the beginning. Star Wars is one of the best examples of this. Episode 4, which was the first movie, if you're not a Star Wars fan, it was the first movie, and it starts with an action scene. This is the evil Empire chasing down our heroes here, the Resistance, and shooting lasers. They board the ship. Not to spoil the first scene for anyone who hasn't seen it, I guess. If you haven't seen it by now, you don't want to see it. But it's the opening scene. But anyway, they board the ship, and they start fighting right away. You drop right into this with no context, and it just grabs you immediately. Like, whoa, something's going down. I'm interested immediately. Wow, spoilers. Yeah, if that's considered a spoiler, well. But the point is, they didn't start at the beginning of the story. They didn't say, oh, we are the resistance, we're fighting the evil empire and they want to attack us, and then, oh no, we're under attack. They just jumped right into, we're under attack. Audience, we're going to trust that you're going to just figure it out on your own why we're being attacked over time. And then you do. As the story unfolds, you start to learn. Anyway, in the context of your apps, don't start right at the beginning. So you have some problem that your app is solving. Don't start way at the beginning. So, for example, if your app is helping students schedule their courses, don't start with, hey, I'm a student taking a college class, taking a college class on college, give some backstory and history, and then all of a sudden say, oh, I have to register for classes, and oh man, using the hub and UB Learns really sucks. Man, I wish this were better, and then get on with the rest of the story. Don't start right at the beginning. That's super boring. I would even argue start later, start in here even, but don't start at the very beginning. Start with maybe a student trying to register for classes going, oh man, this is really terrible. We don't need the backstory that this is a student registering for classes. Trust that your audience is going to figure that out, that if they're already registering for classes, we'll fill in the backstory and assume that they're a student. They're probably a college student. They need to take some classes. Don't start right at the beginning. Don't start with their backstory. And this is prevalent in video games as well. I can't tell you how many video games, when I do get a few minutes of free time, how many video games I tried to start, and they started at the beginning. And they said, oh, I'm some character from this village, and you're walking around this village and talking to the townsfolk, and they're like, oh, this is a great, just normal, regular old day we're having. Isn't this great? Whoa, I'm going to go fishing. And nothing's happening, and then finally something happens where the game finally starts. I don't get to that point. I will put down the game long before then. Once I'm walking around and it's like, hit A to jump, I don't play that game. I just don't have the patience or the time to deal with that. I'm not going to deal with it. And a lot of people watching your video, especially if this is a video and you're trying to sell your app online, how many internet users do you think are going to spend a minute watching the intro to your video before you get to the point? It's going to take forever. Nobody's waiting that long unless they're already invested, unless they're your professor who's watching it to give you a grade. Nobody else is going to watch that thing because you're boring them before they're invested. Get them invested right away. Jump into the action. Okay, user's doing something. Oh no, this sucks. Okay, well here's our app. This app is going to save the world. And then get into the rest of the story. And your app should be introduced not as this golden solution, this silver bullet that just fixes everything right away. It's always more interesting for storytelling purposes if you introduce the solution and then things actually get worse after the solution's introduced before the solution finally starts kicking in and making things better. So this might be a little tough to do in your videos, but you want to, the first mention of your app, it shouldn't be like those infomercials where everything goes from black and white to color immediately as soon as the product shows up. Give it some time to breathe. Let them, the product is there, but things get worse before they start getting better. But eventually your product is going to save the day. Your project is going to make everybody's lives so much better. It's going with the Star Wars storytelling. Obi-Wan, the Force, everything shows up pretty early on in the movies. The solutions are all there, but it takes Luke a while to get used to using the Force. And, in case there is one person out there who hasn't seen the movie, hasn't seen the first Star Wars, I won't spoil all of it, but it takes Luke a while to get used to the Force to eventually have the resolution of the movie. It's not just Obi-Wan and the Force are here. Oh, everything's perfect now. That's not exactly how it works for good storytelling purposes. So you could think of how the movie could be rewritten to not do this and have just the absolute low point of the movie. The heroes are all just completely beaten down. And then at that point, Obi-Wan shows up and says, hey, Luke, there's this cool thing called the Force. And then all of a sudden, everything's resolved. It just doesn't... it gives your your product or the story or the hero a much more victorious moment if it's not an immediate solution. If they have some time to really emphasize how much this is helping. It's just better storytelling instead of, oh, here's some magic MacGuffin that fixes everything. Okay, everything's fixed. Don't turn your app into a MacGuffin that just, you need this and then all your problems will be solved. Like those infomercials. So give it time. You know, I didn't even notice that when I was reviewing the slides. 15K. Yeah. Oops. Things get a lot worse before they get better. And then Thursday, nothing. So I'm sure you've all heard this. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Use pictures, use visuals. Don't use words to explain your points. I talked about this earlier, but you should be using hardly any written words, only when they're really necessary in your presentations. Spellvine Runeslayer, you might have to watch the movie. So that was the forecast for Alderaan. And then nothing on Thursday. You'd have to watch the movie again. Yeah, it might be Kelvin. Well, Kelvin would be even colder then. Anyway, you should be using a lot of pictures in your presentations. If you're showing a lot of text, it's no good, man. No good. Even with our presentations in class, like we have to have the text for students studying the slides later. But that has a detrimental effect on our presentations, which I'll explain on the next slide. I'll keep you in suspense. It's another good emotion to keep you interested. And also keep them surprised. Every once in a while you should throw something, not necessarily super random, but a little bit random in there that's going to catch them off guard. If it's too obvious where a presentation's going and what all the next steps are going to be, the audience is going to check out. But if every once in a while you throw in some gag, something that's going to catch them off guard, that's going to keep them a little interested. Surprise, another way we can play with people's emotions to get them interested. And Dr. Hertz is the undisputed king of color in his slides, using color to highlight the points that you want the audience to pay attention to. He has this down to an art or a science even. I don't do this so much in my own slides that I make, so I left this slide in just because I know Dr. Hertz does this a lot, and I should be doing it more. And like if you look at my 116 slides, it's black text on white slides. That's it. That's what I do. Sometimes I bold a word, but it's still the same color. And then when it's a security risk, I highlight it in red usually. In my diagrams, I'll use more colors, but like all my stack and heap diagrams, I'll use green to show that it's on the RAM stick, which is typically green, but I don't know if anybody really sees that connection anyway. Anyway, color is your friend. Understated. Where to use bullets and where not to use bullets. I cut out a few slides here, but in a presentation, and I'll just verbalize it here, but in a presentation like your video, no bullets. Like, why have bullets at all? We do use bullets in written medium, so like when you're downloading our slides and reading them, we need bullet points so to separate the points that we're making, and then you can read them on your own time. If we were not worried about students downloading slides, probably no bullet points, maybe none at all. There's definitely arguments for 0 bullet points ever. I would argue that you should use them, and I want to highlight this, not necessarily about presentation, so I'm off of my key point here, but even in emails and any written medium, if you're making a Google Doc that you're going to share with somebody, bullet points are your friend. Breaking up, and if you have a big block of text in an email, break that into bullet points. Be like, here are my points, and then bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Can really make it easier to read, easier to digest, and much more clear what your key point is. I get emails from students all the time that's one giant paragraph of text that rambles on, and it takes a bit of mental effort to just understand what they're talking about, what their key point is, what they're asking me to do, what they want from me. It takes a while to do that. But if it's like, yo, I have these concerns. 1, my group mate sucks. 2, my PM sucks. 3, I'm amazing at everything. 4, can you do this for me and change my grade? Like, that email is a lot more clear than a block of text ranting about everything. Anyway, give you a peek into what my inbox looks like. It's a lot of what it is. So use bullet points effectively for your presentation video. Probably not at all, especially when you're limiting the text down to a bare minimum. Really shouldn't have any bullet points. But bullet points are effective in other areas of your life. Use bullet points effectively. I'm a beast. Everyone else sucks. I promise I'm not a narcissist. Yeah, see? Beefy Indian Kid gets an A now. Because that is easy to break down, easy to read. I can even read that while I'm lecturing. If a comment, if that were all one block of text, I wouldn't be able to parse it as quickly. Use notes appropriately. I don't like using notes at all. I'll use them sometimes if I'm really all over if I have a lecture that has a lot of stuff in it and no slides, like a live demo. I'll use notes then because I don't have the slides to guide me. For your presentations, you shouldn't be using notes at all because it's a recorded video. You can write up your notes, but don't refer to them while you're recording because it's just going to come across as kind of fake. I'm sure you've all seen presentations where somebody's just reading their notes. Like when they're clearly reading and they're looking down and reading, it takes away the eye contact with the audience and it makes it look like you're not even paying attention to your own presentation when you're not making a connection with the audience. And sometimes people who do this, I've seen as a student, seen professors do this where they're clearly just reading their notes like this, and a student will have their hand up for like ever, and they won't even know because they're not engaging with the audience. So if you do have a live demo and you have notes to help you and guide you, make sure you're not focused on those notes. Connect with the audience, look at the audience, and make sure that they know that you're talking to them. And again, doesn't quite apply to your, it is XKCD to your videos. But when you're doing a live presentation, don't fixate on like one member of the audience either. You make sure you're looking around. Make sure the whole room knows that you're talking to them and addressing them directly. So like doing live presentations, I'll look around the whole class and make sure that, I'm talking directly to the entire room. And in Twitch, trying to keep an eye on chat, it's a little tougher because I have to talk and read at the same time. It's not the easiest thing, but keeping an eye on chat and making sure I'm connecting with you during the lecture is an important thing. It's going to help you be more engaged. Or else, why wouldn't you just watch a video? If I'm not interacting with you, this could just be a video that I posted. So this is a little less important for the videos that you will be posting, that I'll be watching your videos. But still, make sure you're addressing the camera. Maybe not directly. I never look directly into the camera when I'm lecturing. But make sure you're addressing the audience and not just staring down at your notes and reading is an important thing. And passion. I think this is where I get away with a lot of stuff, where I don't use color and I maybe overuse bullet points a bit. There's a lot of things that I can improve upon. I think this is why I get away with it, because I just love what I'm teaching. I enjoy showing things off, especially when it gets more technical. Like we talked about linked lists in 116 today, and I really enjoy explaining that kind of stuff to people. That's why I'm doing a big reason, not the reason, but a big reason why I'm doing this job. And I'll see this in your videos. I'll see if you have passion within the first 5 seconds of your video. So I was just watching the hackathon videos yesterday, and it's seriously in 5 seconds of the video, I can tell if it's a good project or not. Obviously there's going to be some exceptions to that, but I would be willing to bet that watching your presentation videos, within 5 seconds of your video, I could guess within at least one letter grade what your final grade is, what the final, at least team grade is for that project. I won't be able to tell who did what for the individual grading. But 5 seconds of your video, I could grade that project. Obviously, I won't because that's not fair. I'm going to go by the rubrics and everything. But 5 seconds in, that's all it takes to know if you're passionate, if your team is passionate about that project or not. The teams that are passionate, it's going to come across immediately, and it's going to come across loud and clear that we built a thing and we're proud of it. That's going to come across in your video. If you're not passionate about it, your video is going to be, oh, and then we have a login page. Let me log in with our dev account, and then you can see our splash screen comes up, and then we can click on this. And like, if you're not passionate about it, your presentation is just flat. And you know, for grading purposes, maybe you'll get away with that. I don't think we have anything specific in the rubric for passion, but it makes for a boring presentation. Like, nobody's going to invest in your company for you to build this app. And nobody's going to fund your Kickstarter. Nobody's going to get excited about your project, because if you don't care and you have this boring presentation, for those of you old enough to know Ferris Bueller's Day Off, if you have this boring presentation, why should anyone else care? If you have a boring presentation for your video, why should I care? Why should Dr. Hertz care? Why should your PM care? And this also translates into your grading demos for your PMs. Not that they're going to grade you on passion. They can't do that. They're going to grade you on the rubric. But if you're clearly passionate about your project, they're going to see that and they're going to care a little more. Like, maybe it doesn't change your grade at all, but they're going to be excited and into the project too. If you show them that you do care, maybe it's not. Let me back up a second. It's not going to change your grade because we're grading by the rubric. But if you're passionate about your project, I'd be willing to bet that you put a lot of passion, that same passion, into your code, into your Scrum board, into your user stories, into your tasks, and that all that's probably going to be good to go anyway. So it might not affect your grade, but indirectly probably does. If you're passionate about your project, this is why I spend so much time at the beginning of the semester. I don't know how much I spent this semester because nobody listens anyway, to be honest. But when you're forming your groups, form your group around a project you're all interested in. If you don't, about midway through the semester, right about now, you're probably falling apart. If you gathered around an idea that you weren't passionate about, maybe you got together with the people who you want to have a team with, and you said, we need an idea for this project. Jesse expects the submission by Thursday. What are we going to do? And then someone's like, I don't know, let's make a game, I guess, or whatever. And the rest of you all are like, I don't know, sounds good. If that describes your team at the beginning of the semester, by about now, I'm guessing you're the ones who are emailing me saying your team's falling apart. You have to be excited about your project. I shouldn't say you have to, but if you're passionate about your project, if the whole team's passionate about the project, everything else is going to fall into place. Everybody's going to do what they're supposed to be doing. You're going to be excited to work on the project, and everything's just going to go a lot smoother than if you are one of the teams who didn't listen to me, just kind of picked a project idea because maybe you thought it'd be easy. Those teams usually don't do so well. Sometimes they're able to scrape by with A's even, but they have a miserable time getting there. So be passionate about your project. For the project idea, it's too late to change. But in your presentation, get the audience excited about why they should care. If this is an actual Kickstarter video, why should people part with their hard-earned money to support your project? And they're not, unless you make them. Make them care. Tell a good story. Make it interesting. Get them excited. Get them feeling something. And then they're going to care. But if you don't care, nothing else you do is going to work. If you go through the motions and say, well, professor said I shouldn't start at the beginning, so let me not start at the beginning. They said my product shouldn't just solve the problem immediately, so let's not do that. And then if you treat it like a formula like that, and have a very formulaic, logical approach to this, it's not going to work. If you're passionate about your project, though, you can make you can do a lot of different things with your presentation, and it's all going to work because you're excited. It's going to get them excited. A few little tidbits. As much as I wanted to cut this slide has a good point to it, so I kept it here. Is something Dr. Hertz likes to do in his slides is if he has a human character on his slides, the character will always be looking at the content. So if he has some human character on the slide or animated like this slide, they'll always be looking at the content. So maybe he has some code example here in 115. There will be somebody here looking at the code, and it helps to focus the audience. It helps them think, hey, this is something I should be looking at, instead of because the image shows me to look at that. Instead of looking somewhere else or looking at Dr. Hertz as he's presenting or looking at this image, the image is directing my eyes over here. So I'll do that. I don't think I did it today. I think my windows got a little messed up. But I usually put this window... Yeah, I resize. When I went to IntelliJ, I resize things sometimes. But I usually have my window like this. So when I'm looking at my content, like I'm staring at the center of the slide right now, on stream, I'm looking at the slide. It looks like I'm looking at the slide also, which I am. But it has my eyes directing you towards the content. I had my windows a little off there. But that's something I learned from Matt. He told me that, and then I'm like, hey, when I'm streaming, I'm the human there. I should be always looking at the content. So I try to do that, and get them excited, get them feeling emotions, and get them focused on the content. Once they care, they're passionate with you. They're gonna evoke some emotions with them. They're gonna care even more. You got them directed, their eyes directed towards the content. You got them feeling some emotions, so they care. And then to really nail the storytelling, it helps to give your characters names. If you have some story that you're telling, you notice earlier in the semester when we talk about get pushing, we have 2 characters that we create, and those characters actually go through a story. We don't just say you should use separate branches because then it keeps your work separate from your coworkers. We don't just drone on about that. We say, here's 2 characters. Here's what can go wrong with the Git repo. You want to avoid that. Here's how Git can help. So naming your characters always helps. I did this I think I was reminiscing on Friday actually, of some old 115. That was 115. That's why I didn't do that in 116, because it was a 115 course. But 115 where I had a character, Sally, who would have some situation come up for each of the homework assignments, and I think there were 4 homeworks that semester. And then for each homework, we would go like to the next phase of her life. She would start out as a college student. She would get an entry-level job. Then she would be more successful in the later assignments. To the last assignment where she had so much free time, her whole job was automated through your previous 3 assignments, that she was looking for where she should be going on vacation and using all her free time on. And there was this narrative throughout the whole course, which I miss. I want to get that back. I forgot about that for a few semesters. I got to get that back. But giving your characters names, even in your presentation, if there's some user in your presentation who's going to be using your app and it's going to improve their quality of life, give them a name. Name that character and tell a story with that character as the main character of that story. And walk through them discovering, having some problem, discovering the app and using that app to solve their problem. Walk them through that, tell a whole story with that. And of course, the emphasis on stories, I forgot to mention this earlier, but the emphasis on stories, same reason why we use user stories, they're more relatable. They're more relatable to your users than if you gave them some spec sheet. We're going to build software that does X, Y, and Z. Tell it as stories. And with user stories, I've even seen characters being created for user stories as well. You create this character, you give them a backstory and a bunch of context for their life, like what their life is, usually based on an actual user that you interview with and meet in person. You create that character, and then the entire dev team understands this character at a fairly deep level. And then the user stories are, as Susan, I want to, and then you know what Susan means because you've gotten to know her through the project. So giving those characters names can help in a lot of different contexts. And don't listen to user input. I'll put my twist on this. I'll cover the slide, but I'll put my twist on it. Never trust user input. If you just ask your users, hey, how was my presentation? They'll give you all kinds of, they'll say stuff. They'll say something. If I just said, hey, how was today's lecture? I'll probably get some feedback like this. I won't really have well, you'll probably say it would help if my professor could pronounce words. But you'll get some feedback that might not be super helpful. I'll put my twist on this. I like to use the trust but verify method. I'll trust the user input. I'll say, look, I believe you. I think that is something that should improve. But then I'll also verify. I'll do my own analysis and see, okay, is this actually something I need to improve? Or are they talking about something else? Or are they indirectly talking about some other problem? Is this just a symptom of a deeper problem? Well, and then I'll get to the bottom of it and then make an adjustment as needed. I always read the course evals, and I trust that is how the students are feeling, but I won't just trust whatever solution they give me. And of course, there's the security context with this too. Never trust your front end. Anything a user gives your back end server, don't trust that. Always validate. Always validate. And don't brag. This was mentioned earlier in the slides, but don't brag. Don't just be like, our product is awesome, that's why you're going to buy it. No, our product is going to make you awesome. If like I don't teach computer science and say computer science is awesome. Well, sometimes I say that. Computer science is awesome, that's why you should learn it. No, who cares? Computer science is something that's going to make you awesome. You learn how to control computers. Look at how much of the world is controlled by computers these days. It's basically everything, especially now with COVID. We're all interacting through the internet. The internet really is the central focus of everyone's lives now, whether it used to be or not. With COVID, it really is in phenomenal, kind of scary ways. If you know how to control computers and tell them what to do and understand how they work and understand how the internet works, that makes you powerful. That makes you kick ass. You can do a lot of things with that a lot of other people are, basically slaves to this technology. Well, not slaves. I shouldn't use that. But are basically subject to whatever technology is out there. If you can create your own software and you're not just reliant on what already exists, you can create your own software. That makes you kick ass. That's why you should learn computer science. Not because computer science kicks ass. Same thing with your project. Your project, maybe it does kick ass. I think computer science does kick ass. But that's not how I'm going to present it to somebody, because that's not relatable. Your project might kick ass, but don't sell it on that point. Sell it on the point that it's going to make your users more powerful and more incredible and able to do things that they never dreamt possible before. That's why they should use your app. Not just because your app is awesome. Because it's going to make them awesome. And keep the clutter out of your slides. This slide here, explaining how different programming languages came about and evolved from each other. I put this slide up. I could start giving off solutions to homework assignments and tell everyone exactly how to cheese the whole course and get an A without actually working. And few students will be listening to me. Let's say maybe half of them will be listening to me. So to put this another way, if I put up this slide, you're going to do one of three things, I'll say. You're either going to read the slide and look at all of the connections between the languages, which some of you are probably doing right now. 2, you're going to listen to me and ignore the slide. So you're going to either read the slide and ignore me, listen to me and ignore the slide, or 3, just ignore both of it and just not pay attention at all. But you can't read this slide and pay attention to what I'm saying at the same time. So when you put up something like this in your presentation, let's just say it's a 50-50 split. Half your audience isn't listening to you anymore because they're trying to process your ridiculously complex slide. You can't do that. You can't put this much information on a single slide because a lot of people are not listening to you. You can't multitask. You know what? Nobody can. The human brain cannot focus on two things at once. That's why it's so hard to read chat and present at the same time. Nobody can multitask. The brain is not capable of doing that. You might be able to switch between two tasks so fast that it almost seems like you're multitasking, but you can't actually focus on two things exactly at the same time. So you're splitting their attention, you put up a slide like this, you're splitting your audience's attention. Focus on one thing. What do you want them paying attention to? If it's your words, make sure the slide is related to your words. Maybe it duplicates your words, so if students, if your audience either reads the slide or listens to you, it's the same words. But doing that without just reading your slides and having a boring presentation, it sucks. There's a lot of stuff with that. But a complex slide with this, unless the goal of your presentation, which would be a boring presentation anyway, is to put up a slide like this and say, let me give you a minute to process this slide, and then I'll start talking again. Maybe that makes sense in context. A 50-minute lecture, maybe we'll do that a few times, but a 5 to 7 minute video presentation, don't do this. If you have some complex diagram about how your app works, don't show that in your video. This is an actual picture from a presentation Matt, I believe Matt attended. I guess he didn't say if he took this picture or not. But this slide, way too much information. You lost the audience right there. Nobody's going to care or pay attention to what you're doing after that. And more importantly, this slide, what does this slide say to the back row? It says, you might as well not even be here. I'm not focused on you at all. So always design for the back row, especially when you're live. When these were live presentations, this was a more important piece of information, but always design for the back row. The back row needs to read and see what you're doing just as much as the front row. If you have very small text, you're basically saying to the back row, you might as well not even be here. Don't bother showing up next time. Make sure you're designing for the back row. Everybody should be able to see what the slides are doing. This is another advantage to distance learning, actually. I don't have to design for the back row anymore, which means I can actually fit a little more content on the slide, mostly when I'm going through code examples or pulling up IntelliJ. For technical presentations like that, I can display more information at a time because that's what they're supposed to be learning. But for your videos, everything should be loud and clear, not too much information on the presentation itself. Apple is one of the premier examples of this. It's super clear what's being communicated here. You can't miss, even with Steve Jobs obscuring some of the characters. Well, one character here. A few characters, I guess. You still know exactly what this slide is saying. We sold 2 million iPads in 2 months. Super clear. And Apple does this, or at least Steve Jobs would do this all the time. Actually, absolutely experts at marketing, that company. At the very least, used to be. With these presentations he would present. Watch a Steve Jobs presentation. You'll see a lot of the elements of today's lecture in there. He gets you excited. Sometimes he'll just look at what's being presented and just be like, wow, look at that. It's amazing. He'll pull up a big image of the new iPhone. Whoa, look at that. It's beautiful. He evokes your emotions. He just was able to do that in an incredible way. Apple might still be good at marketing. I'm hedging my bets because I just don't know. But yeah, Beefy Indian Kid, yeah, you got it. The fact that we don't know really hits it right on the head. Yeah, exactly. And that's the end of the presentation on presentations. I know it went a little over there, but, I got into it a bit there. Here's one thing I forgot. There's one thing I missed in there, but oh well. UB Hacking was so well presented. Yeah, UB Hacking was good. My only complaint is the camera work on marbles was making me nauseous. The way he must have been using a mouse to control the camera, and he would just move it in such jerking fashions. My stomach was actually turning watching the marbles a little bit. But that might be just because I'm so old too. I'm an older fella. I'm not even that old, but I'm one of the people who like VR will make me nauseous as well. Yeah, great work everybody on UB hacking. That was an awesome production. Either be filled with CS majors or filled with phlegm. I don't understand. Picture's worth 1,000 words, but too many words is a bad thing, so probably a singular word is better. Yeah, yeah, I can see what you're going. Especially with the Apple example. Like if he did a single picture that somehow captured the sales numbers, maybe a chart that shows sales numbers with no words on it, that's going to be too much. But yeah, just a single word like Apple does. You can see. Oh yeah, App Programmer asked the question. An image versus one word on a slide, which is better? It depends on the slide. I have a lot of slides with just one word that are kind of introducing a new topic. I'll have a slide that says recursion. And I'll say, and it gets the point across, we're about to talk about recursion. No questions about it. That's what's happening. I couldn't really do that with an image with no text on it. But it depends on the context. And most of this stuff in this lecture is, grain of salt advice, and specific situations are going to call for different approaches. But this gives you a toolbox. Here are a lot of different things you can use at different places. And you got to decide when the right place to use each tool is. And sometimes things get reinvented. Like Apple kind of reinvented marketing, especially for computers. In the computer and tech world, they reinvented marketing. They didn't take the existing playbook and just follow the rules. They invented their own playbook and made up new things. That's one thing you can do in marketing and in presentations. Come up with brand new ways to represent content and convey information. People who use person A and person B are the worst. Give them names. I'll sometimes do person A, person B, but only if I'm coming up with an example on the spot. And my mind is just blanking, and I can't think of any names. I'd be like a person. Let's just call him person A and person B. That's not something that should be done on purpose. We usually use Alice and Bob. That's what the security community uses. Is Alice and Bob. Alice is sending a message to Bob, and how are we going to secure that message? So thanks to the security community, instead of person A and B, it's Alice Bob for A and B. A stands with Alice. If they introduce a third character, their name's going to start with C. I forget what the standard is, but their name's going to start with C. Get an enthusiastic guy. I missed a lot of chat in that one. I was trying to get all it still went 10 minutes over, but I was trying to get everything in there. Oh, yeah, I get it, beefy Indian kid. You be hacking, like hacking a lung, hacking up a lung. You be hacking, you be coughing. Oh, man. My wife always says my jokes are funnier if I have to explain them. I think that's what she says anyway. 20 years old. So maybe we just got the weak stomachs, Synchros. I can play for a little bit, and it depends on the game. There's I always forget the name of it, but the game where you're basically running around this environment, kind of like Spider-Man. You have a grappling hook you can shoot, and it grasps onto anything green. So you're going like up in the leaves of trees. You launch it, and you can swing around. That game makes me nauseous as all hell. And then my brother pointed out we were playing it, and I'm like, man, I'm getting nauseous. And then he got nauseous, and he explained it really well why we were getting nauseous. He's like, if we did that in real life, we would be nauseous. Like, that's just a really crazy thing to be subjecting your body to. So I think the VR was just accurate in that case. Like, if I'm swinging around like Batman through the trees, I'm going to get nauseous because that's absolute hell on your stomach. So that one makes me nauseous almost immediately. I have to put it down. But other VR games don't make me nauseous if they're just like walking around and more normalcy. And to go back to the marbles example, if I was like literally like in a pod that was whipping around like that, I'd be getting nauseous. Like if that were real, in real life, that was me flying around, I'd be like, lay off the controls, man. I'm going to throw up back here. Apple's One More Thing? I don't remember that. I might have missed that one. The difference between 312 and 370? I don't remember what 370 is. Let me look it up. Oops. I said UB. How'd I get Stony Brook as the number one result? Introduction to Design? Oh, it's Alan's course. They're biased. I'm biased, but take them both. I'm biased towards like the internet and web apps and stuff. Take them both, and you will be an excellent web developer. 312, the quick one-line difference, 312 is back-end and 370 is front-end. So 370 is showing you how to design the front end of a website to make a great user experience. 312 is focusing on the server side and the back end and how do the different internet protocols work and how does that front end communicate with the back end and what does the back end do? How does the back end process all the requests that it gets at a fairly low level? We go at the protocol level, so we tear apart like HTTP. What is an HTTP request? And we process those as a sequence of bytes. So that's the kind of level we're talking about 312. If you're only worried about, if you only want to think about design and you want to be a front-end dev, take just 370 and you could skip 312. If you want to be a back-end dev, take 312 and skip 370. I would take them both. If you want to do anything to do with web, take them both. You take both. I mean, you got all the tools to be a really fantastic full-stack developer. Even if you want to favor one of the front end or back end, having a good understanding of how the other half lives is going to really benefit you. Wildlands is the name. I knew it had lands in it, but I couldn't think of the first part. I'd actually played it for a while too. I fought through the nausea and only put it down when I had to, when I felt like I was going to throw up. And I got a few of the orbs. You go really like high up in these things, and there's some hidden orbs. I wanted to know what happened when I got them all, but I couldn't play that long without throwing up, and I had work to do. But I got the headset for the lab that we should be using if we were live, if we were on campus. The lab that we'd be using for this course, Baldy 19. But I got the VR for that. So once I unpacked it and I had TA's help and set it all up, I had to play around with it, of course. And that was, it's one of the free demos that you can play. That was another kind of sad thing. I don't want to rant about this too long, but I got all this equipment. I got VR and I got a Microsoft Oculus. No. The HoloLens. I got a HoloLens for the course as well. And I wanted to see some cool AR and VR apps using this equipment that you might not have access to otherwise. So I got it for the lab so everybody can use this cool equipment. And I saw very few projects actually utilize that equipment. I wanted the hardware to get more use. It was mostly just used for students to take a break with, which is what I used it for too. But, in VR I don't think is going to take off the way I had hoped it was, but AR I think will eventually take off. So having the HoloLens is part of the class, I thought would have been you know, getting students on the ground floor of what I hope will be an AR revolution eventually. It might take quite a while. Nobody's going to wear a HoloLens out in public. Nobody was going to wear Google Glass out in public. But once AR can fit on a contact lens, then we're going to see some really cool stuff. Once you can be inconspicuous with it, that's going to be awesome. I'll be one of the first. I'll be an early adapter for that for sure. If I could wear contact lenses during a lecture and look out at the class, or like a student asks me a question after class, if it can recognize who they are and like identify their names and maybe give me some outline of the progress in the course, and if they've sent me any emails that semester, if it can just give me all that information, I can be just like, yo, hey, robot courier, yo, what's going on? How you been? I see that you sent this email and whatever. If I can give you all that context right there, I think that'd be incredible. Having this just a whole built-in HUD that I have, and be like Iron Man, where it just gives me all that. Where Jarvis is always giving me information about students. Then it's really going to take off, and then we're going to get into some Black Mirror episodes. That's where AR is going to head after that. But it's got to shrink down into a contact lens first. Maybe you have to like have a battery, the CPU and battery pack and everything in your pocket, and then that communicates to the contact lens, which is just a screen. But that's when AR is really going to skyrocket, in my opinion. I'll hedge it with that, in my opinion. How do I not know one more thing? Well, I guess I gotta look it up now. Is that how they introduced a big product?
Hey guys, it's Greg.
Oh, 52 minutes?
We're going to explore the history of one more thing, which is a phrase used near the end of some Apple keynotes to generate excitement before announcing a new product or service. Now this topic
Okay.
is the second place winner of last week's vote.
Yeah, so when they... So many choices. I don't care where I watch it. One more thing, whoa! Oh my goodness, I can see why I don't know their current marketing stuff. I bet Steve Jobs didn't do it this boring. You should just say here and one more thing and then show it. You think VR is going to take off before AR? I think VR is going to be too much of a niche market. I don't think mainstream is going to adapt to VR. I'd like to see it, because if VR had a bigger market, there'd be more reason to develop for it, and we get cooler things. Right now, we just get crappy ports and half-assed tech demos. All right, let's see a real one from Steve. I guarantee he does it better than that. That was boring. Oh my god. Yeah. Hey, that's better. There's one more thing, and here that thing is. It's not Steve Jobs, though. It was edited anyway. Anyway, yeah, I get it. The Steve Jobs is a marketing mastermind. Was. Rip. AR Mario Kart could be fun. Yeah, Robot Courier, and then we're getting into some Black Mirror episodes at that point. Which, hey, I'm excited for. It'll be interesting at the very least. It's kind of weird. Like technology moves so fast these days, but in other ways it is moving kind of slow as well. Like we keep getting faster computers and stuff, but there hasn't been like a huge revolution in quite a while. You could count like the smartphone. You count that as a revolution, but I mean things got smaller to the point where you can hold it in your hand and everything's wireless. But it's still a bunch of transistors. It's just more transistors. We haven't had that huge revolution. I think if this is even what you're talking about. But once you have an interface where your electronics can interface with your biology, that's when we're going to see that's like the next evolution. I've been saying that for a while, actually. I think that's the next evolution of, moving us past silicon. We're going to move into some biological stuff. And yeah, ethical concerns are going to be plenty, and I think that's going to slow things down a bit, and for good reason. We should be cautious of trampling into that domain. But it's got to happen. I think it's going to happen eventually. We're understanding more and more about how the brain works all the time, even though it's still mostly a mystery. But once we understand how it works and can integrate, if I can install a memory chip and have perfect memory and have it perfectly integrate with my brain, like that'd be crazy. If I can have a flash drive with all kinds of information, like the Matrix, where you can just download information just so I know kung fu without having to take years and years to study. I think that's in the future. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but I think that's the next huge thing, the next revolution. Yeah, speed of light is the bottleneck. I do enjoy that. I have this whole thing in 199 I used to do where I would show them actual ping times for our server in California, and then compare that with the speed of light. How long would it take the speed of light to travel from Buffalo to California and back for that round trip? And the two numbers are comparable. It was about half, I think, half or a third of the speed of light on average. And that's not going a straight line distance because, the servers aren't connected straight line, and just bouncing around inside the fiber, and possibly even going through copper for a little bit of it, and then going through the air and being translated through all the every hop that it has to make. It's still comparable to the speed of light is absolutely incredible. And the fact that you'll never have like real time, no lag gaming with everybody with people from anywhere on the planet, because the speed of light can't even do that. Like you can't. If you want 60 frames per second, somebody in California who hits a button on their keyboard, it has to take more than a 60th of a second to reach you. So you can't have like perfectly seamless live real time gaming. Like you wouldn't be able to play a 1v1 fighter with somebody in California. It just can't happen because of the speed of light. Like, that's our limit. And we're so close to it, too, that we just can't get there. That always fascinates me. That's our limit, is literal physics. Like, quantum physics is in our way, saying you just can't do that. You can't do that. Connect to a local server and play against people in your region. That's the best you can do. Quantum computing still can't go faster than the speed of light, though. All of physics, as far as we know, is bound by the speed of light. Can't go faster than that. Connectomics? Was that what Elon's calling his project? I'm not familiar with the details. Connecting technology to biology. Neuralink? That name makes more sense. Speaking of presentations, naming too. Your naming should make sense. For your presentation, we're going to talk about connectomics. Okay, let me explain what that is. But if you say Neuralink, like, I immediately know roughly what you're talking about. That name helps your presentation. Name your projects too will help your presentation. Give it a meaningful name, just like naming your variables and methods. Hopefully you have good practices all around. Can't we beat the speed of light by coding better? I mean, sometimes we do. Excuse me, with caching. And with video games like that, you can do some machine learning to predict what that player is going to do in the future. So in ways we actually can. I know you were joking, but we kind of do break the speed of light in a few different ways. Obviously don't literally break the speed of light, but there are things we can do to get around that limitation. If you, like a first-person shooter, you're playing a first-person shooter online, and you see a player move, like in a straight line, and then all of a sudden they just glitch out a little bit, and now all of a sudden they're somewhere else. That's the code predicting where they were gonna be. That was probably that user, dropped some packets or whatever. So for whatever reason, we didn't get information about that user. So I think it usually just keeps their velocity. Maybe they're more sophisticated, but it keeps their velocity and then keeps them moving on that vector. So you're still getting updates even though you're not getting the exact position, but the game is predicting where that player should be based on the information that it has. And then once it does get an update from that player and the server says, hey, this player is here now, then it's going to update that player. And you're going to see them run ridiculously fast, faster than they can possibly go in game to be able to get to the new location. But you do see that the games will predict to at least some degree where that user should be. And I would be willing to bet that they have some, at least for the main big AAA online games, some kind of prediction other than most recent velocity to predict how that player will actually be behaving in the game. And then when it gets the update, it can apply the corrections. So we can get around that a little bit. You could game with somebody further away and then have the game server, your local server, predict and have a fairly seamless interaction. But again, you wouldn't do that in like a fighting game, but a first-person shooter, they could get away with it. Did I say? Yeah, no, I just said fighting game. A 1v1 fighting game. Where it's down to the frame. You got to hit your inputs on exact frames and react. Have a few frames to react. Doing that over an internet connection would be nigh impossible. Yeah. I used to think first-person shooters were pretty simple. Like, they're just taking the same formula over and over again and just putting a new coat of paint on top, but having better graphics. But there's actually a lot of technology involved. When you once you, in my opinions, it's from the online days. But once it's online and you have servers handling all that, there's a lot of really fancy code going on. There's a lot of complex stuff happening there. They have and you can have a pretty good FPS online experience even without the best internet connection, without the fastest internet connection. To be able to do that takes some code. That takes some work. And it's also easy to mess up. You can have if you have crappy servers, you're going to have a terrible FPS online experience. So you can send fake packets in the game, but there's only so much you can do because the server's going to validate everything. Trust but verify, and never trust anything that your user sends you. You can send the fake packets, but if it's not something you can physically do in the game, the server's not going to allow it. But what you can do is receive the packets, get the packets that the game's sending you. The game has to send you all of the player information and everything so the game can render all the graphics. What you can do is hack into the packets that it's sending and then write things like aimbots. Like aimbots are always going to be a thing in first-person shooters because the server has to give you all the game state. It has to give you the state, the locations of all the players, and your location and everything. And you can use that raw data to write your aimbot. But sending packets that spoof information, that's not going to happen because any competent developer better be validating those inputs and saying, hey, this isn't something you are allowed to do in game. Your location literally can't be over there. That would require teleportation. You're not allowed to do that. Nice try. Better luck next time. But you can have your aimbot take those packets and then send valid packets for valid inputs and valid movements and actions back to the server, just without a human player. That I've thought about that for a while. Like, I don't know what can ever be done. Going back to our security thing, that one's a game. It's a game between the hackers and the developers, and the hackers are always going to win at some point. You can keep going to the next step of the cat and mouse game, but there's never, I don't see any way to just end that game, any way to make that not a game. That's always going to happen. It's always going to be a thing. People are going to write aimbots. I don't see it ever changing. Even to the extremes, you can just simulate the human and use a whole bunch of oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the name, but a lot of image processing and video processing and just whatever's being sent to your screen. Analyze those frames, those actual literal rendered frames, and look for the opposing team and do it that way. Basically simulating a human doing the same thing your eyeballs are doing and your hands are doing with the controller. You're never going to win that one as a developer. The hackers are always going to come up with something. Best you can do is detect and ban. That's why that's always going to be a topic. You're always going to be hearing about that. Technology just doesn't exist to prevent it. Yeah. I know, right? Synchronous, it's phenomenal what it's doing. Even just local single player, just the amount of stuff they're rendering per frame with the graphical fidelity that they have these days to be able to process all that even, and then you throw the online component like you're saying, it's absolutely insane what's happening there. Marvel technology. I should make that a 116 project. I'm sure they'd love that. Just make an FPS. No big deal. We have the technology. Actually, the graphics would be the toughest part. But we build the technology for the logic. Well, nothing like what we're talking about here, but to have something that worked kind of crappy, we could do. Yeah, exactly. Especially when they have monetary incentives, they're always gonna do it. Yeah, and I think that's why you didn't see battle royales until fairly recently in the past few years. Because having the server handle that is, it's not trivial. That's for sure. But anyway, 4:30. I'm calling it a day at that. I'm gonna try to. My intent is to work on your Sprint 2 gradings. I want to do all the peer evals and individual grading tonight. So hopefully I'll get that done. At the very latest, I'll do it sometime tomorrow. But my plan is to get it done tonight. But with that, I'll see everybody Wednesday. Take care. Have a great day.